Howdy Internet, this is Blue Asterism Solstice, and today I'm going to play another fun game of how well is this speculation gonna age? So far this has been a fun little game for me, really, because one of the last times I've done a speculation aged quite nicely. In fact, the last several times I've done lore theorizations, lore theories, blah. I don't think theorizations is a real term. They aged kind of nicely, honestly, peering into what could be the likelihood of this and that for the DLC. So, yeah. I would say they've aged like fine wine. So I'm definitely excited to see what the DLC actually has in store. And I'm going to actually give a bit of certain breakdown details of what I'm kind of expecting out of the matter of this. From, like, what I especially see, mind you. Like, the DLC very well could prove me wrong in some way, shape, or form. But I would still want to, like, see it to actually be 100% sure of this or that. But, a lot of this is going to be well, I shouldn't say a lot of this. A fair portion of this is going to be half based around, my inverse lore theory of Dark Souls 3 to Elden Ring. Or even you could say, like, Dark Souls to Elden Ring, realistically. And yes, I have made it a dark theme comparison for the sensitive eyes. I got you, homies. I got you. But, let me kind of explain what this is. So, Elden Ring overall has this tendency, I've noticed, of doing, like, little lore inverted details from Dark Souls as a series. Like, let me kind of go into some of this list here. Faram. There is Faram Azula instead of in Elden Ring. But Faram was the name of a god of war, who was name-stricken for befriending dragons and seen as a traitor for it. Whereas Godwyn the Golden was remembered for befriending the dragons to stop war. Then we have Gwendolyn, who was blind and had the snakes thing going on there. Gwendolyn was also in charge of the Way of Blue. The blind individual of the family tree in Elden Ring was Malenia, the Blade of Miquella. And in Elden Ring we have no head of the Blues as like a covenant, as a guidance of saying this is our code of conduct. Instead, there's just these random rings you're able to buy pretty much at the start of the game. So it's like, wonder where these actually came from, why it should matter. And it's like, in general, I feel like there should really be more incentives to, like, the multiplayer aspect in general, to PvP in general, to go rescue a host in general. I feel like that is something that is in general lacking overall. But moving on, DS3, the sun, or Dark Souls in general, the sun was seen as the most important. It was the way of light. It was part of Gwyn's way of white. Or you could also say that it was more of a Lloyd thing. Though he was a little self-proclaimed and led just a huge dramatic charge on what was seen as the Accursed, but the Accursed were the actual regular people of the world. Everyone who was human was technically accursed, but some, like, showed signs to it sooner than others. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. In Elden Ring, the Erdtree is the most important. In Dark Souls 3, Prince Lothric was sickly born and the in-charge twin, whereas Lorien was the healthy born and the enslaved twin. In Elden Ring, Miquella was the healthy and in-charge twin. Malenia was the sickly follower twin. She wasn't enslaved, she just was a follower of him. Or at least that we know of. Now, here's where it can be a little controversial here, just because we don't know much about Messmer yet. Now, dragon hunters were remembered in DS3, or in Dark Souls in general. They were heroes because they slayed the dragons. Whereas dragon slayers in Elden Ring are not exactly celebrated as like heroes. Like, yeah, they can slay a dragon, but oftentimes they became more monster-like. And that very well could be part of why Messmer was like forgotten and deemed a traitor. Although I do think there's actually a very different reason for that. And I think what it actually is that if we take this theory, the inverse lore theory, seriously, it would actually more than likely be that Messmer was the opposite of Seath the Scaleless. And also an opposite of Gwyndolin, where he wasn't born but earned blind, but he does have like one eye closed, and he also has like all the snakes to him, like coming from his body. And he was trying to become more dragon-like as this divine heir sort of ideal entity, which could partially see him as a traitor, but I think more than likely it is of Seath the Scaleless, where it was a dragon that betrayed its own kind because it wasn't a true dragon. But in this case scenario, because he wasn't a true dragon and wanted to become a true dragon, he betrayed his own kind, the Erdtree. And if it was set ablaze, he probably could better promote that concept. That is my current theory. It's something like that. Let's see. Oh, yes. People were naturally accursed in Dark Souls. People weren't accursed by nature normally in Elden Ring, unless they were just sort of born wrong. Like, if they were born omen, if they were reborn as undead, as recreations of death. So, stuff like that. But, let's see. I already mentioned that part. Accursed were unable to die in Dark Souls. Accursed stayed dead in Elden Ring because their souls can't be returned to the Erdtree. But those not accursed return to the Erdtree and become alive again. See, giants are friends of the holy in Dark Souls series. Giants are sworn enemy of the holy, as they had fire and it was a threat to the Erdtree. Let's see. Madness was spread by distributing flame and eyes, specifically Pontiff Sulyvahn's eyes. In which case, that would mean Shabriri was our Pontiff Sulyvahn, where he wasn't some tree man. He was some reborn regular man. Well, they were both arguably reborn in some sense, but Pontiff Sulyvahn, it was more of a spiritual rebirth, where he took inspiration in seeing the flames of the abyss, the profane flame as it was called. And if you looked into his eyes, you could see the abyss also. in which case he would give his eyes out to kind of like brainwash people, and overall the spreadness of his madness turned people beast-like. But this was not a thing in Elden Ring at all. Instead, your eyes just sort of melted away. You gave your eyes for madness. So that's the explanation of that subject. But without further ado, let's actually tackle some of the actual video here. There's definite other topics that I could add to this, but this is more of a summarized sort of comparison to explain the theory that I had. Now, I'm not going to talk anything about the audio for the most part, but something I'm noticing is this set being used right here. It does not look like the likely NPC talking that we assumed would be Rico, which, if I recall correctly, he had like some kind of open toe footwear, and he didn't have a robe of this length and this type. So this is more than likely not Rico, and more than likely the player standing here. Now, of course, the trailer here tells us by Miquella that touch the withered hand, and I'll be not long behind you. To basically the Land of the Shadows, as this place is called. Land of the Shadow. A place obscured by the Erdtree, where the goddess Marika first set foot, a land purged in an unsung battle, set ablaze by Mesmer's flame, divesting himself of his flesh, his strength, his lineage. Oh yeah, I skipped this line. It was this land that Miquella departed, his lineage of all things golden. He divested himself of that. And more than likely, this was to finalize his route in becoming as an Empyrean, if I were to guess. But my other guess was that he has plans involving this place, and I will talk about that in a sec, or like one of those theories in a sec. But the other theory is that instead of causing a great change with the place, he is intending to grant great change to the people, the residents of this place that are accursed. Now, there's a lot of details going on in the map here, but it is entirely difficult to piece together exactly what is all truly going on here. There are some concept arts that are out, but I don't feel any of them are doing any justice to this general topic. But you see there's definitely some interesting looking structures like close by and in the distance. To me, this one looks something like the size of either Castle Morn or like Fort Hate or something. Otherwise, off in the distance there, that almost looks like an old cathedral or something. But in a sec here, that there to me looks kind of like the pillar-filled structure that of like ruins that Moog fights us in, and is also found other locations throughout like Nokron and that. So interesting. Now, if I hadn't seen that earlier bit, I would say that must be like some kind of like hero's grave or something there. Which it still very well could be, but I'm not 100% confident in that. But I think down here could be like something like a liturgical town, like our way to the Erdtree. But we see some kind of road here. You see that it should theoretically go to the left because there's a bridge there. Okay, but now that I've gathered my thoughts a little better, if you look here, this is particularly round, in an unusual kind of round. Someone suggested it's catching sap from this, but I don't quite believe that. I think more than likely it was intended for something else. Now, it is not unusual to have entire building structures intended for like aligning with, say, the rise and falling and movement of the sun. I forget what the proper term of that is, but it's not uncommon. And the fact that there's an unusual lack of discussion on the sun, but still some kind of hidden relevances to it, could suggest that this could be of that kind of relevance. Which does bode quite well with a certain theory I had overall. Now, I did a video on this where I thought to myself, what could be the relevance of the sun? Well, we do see a more modern characteristic of presentation of the sun, the eclipse, where it often has to do with Godwyn the Golden because of his death and soul, death and spirit, and the will of his people not wanting to side with their Erdtree as part of their bidding over Godwyn's, and wanting to restore the soulless demigod with the aid of Miquella, symbolized with the eclipse. In which case, I thought to myself, you know, Godwyn might be in representative of the eclipse, but not just the eclipse. Before he was soulless and needed some kind of rebirth, he might have been an actual just straight up sun, seen as part of the sunlight, and that could be part of where he gets the name the Golden. So I do think that could be relevant to that overall subject. And it could even be the other thing that I was thinking Miquella might be doing here, is using that as part of the eclipse as like a ritual to bring back Godwyn. Maybe Godwyn will be another boss, because it is suspicious how his arena by his weird body is. But overall, the thing to note about this overall place is how absolutely blighted with cursed entities you'll see. And this is a more than likely some sort of footstep of Miquella. This is essentially what his rune would look like. I don't quite understand this bit, but this is theoretically what his great rune should look like his sister's. But we do see continued references to this in general in the later video. Like we've seen like a gesture being performed by a prisoner class. In which case, lying down, ring. We have basically the prisoner class doing the gesture of the ring. And right here we also have Mesmer's spear going up and down, and this sort of loop formed by a snake. And we also see wings from the snake right here to there, which is almost a proper line in the same sense for what we believe is Miquella's great rune as a relevance to the topic. But something else you can also kind of notice in this picture here is all this flame and blaze in that here, which could suggest what we might expect a bit more of as we get closer to Mesmer. We just don't have this set in general. This helmet reminds me of the Bulgoat set, but the rest does not. It reminds me more of the Cadence set, but the Cadence set didn't have an open leg like this. So it's hard to say what this is and belonging to. But yeah, more than likely new fashion. Jar guy, I don't have much to talk about him. Oh, now I'm not 100% sure, but I'm in certainty that this is either a Nox of, like, say, Nokron or something, or it could be of a white mask like Vaati, a war surgeon, notorious of delivering lethal blows as a mercy killing. And as their equipment suggests, they have a bloodlust in under all that sense of mercy. But I say this as uncertainty of who they are specifically because of this part. They could be some kind of Nox with their excessive amounts of face showing. But more than likely to me, this looks more like a mask like Vaati's. In which case, if it is of, like, say, Vaati and his people, they did kidnap Miquella, so it wouldn't surprise me if there was more to him and here in the DLC. Maybe if we don't invade him earlier on, he appears here or something. In terms of, like, colors and that, it's quite a distinctive match to what is Vaati. Although I can't guarantee this part is a dead match. Now, we have no idea who this person is, but we know this is very Raya-Lucarian in design, as well as their presentation matching much of that of those statues that flip places upside down, specifically that study hall. But pretty sure this is some kind of turbine. You see it spinning, what suggests this is some sort of, like, factory performance going on here for manufacturing. We don't exactly know who these are, but this is believed to be the noble from later on. And I am confident it's some kind of noble. His attire does match theirs, of, like, the wandering nobles throughout the entirety of Elden Ring, and there's no signs as to who she could be, so I'm more inclined to assume, with how ornate her attire is presented, and she's otherwise nearly faceless in presentation, she could be a deathbed companion, especially with the lack of noble iconography on her. Now, we also have, like, no idea as to anything of this, but this very well could be, like, some kind of Deathblight swamp. This could be, like, some kind of other form of worm face, like a younger version. And this is just a few omens and the costume, to my understanding. It could be an addressal to omens being hunted. It could be related to the omen killers, in which case disguise yourselves as a couple omens and as, like, a appearing like much of the beastmen, especially if it was Sarash. But you see these omen horns here. These could be excised from previous omens of sorts. But we do have a sort of timeline date as to the relevance of this fella. Noteworthy about that move, we see something a little similar as, like, a fog, smoke cloudy sort of move of Fia's death magic or whatever. And like just outside of the Landau capital, there's a minor Erdtree there with a few with an omen and dressed in black with like a robe on, as well as a few humans, and all dressed in black. Like it's some kind of funeral or something. We don't know what they're doing, but we know they have such like a it's like a gas sort of magic that they can cast. But the skin tones of that feet on that thing reminded me much of Morgoth's in his cutscene. But this yellow lightning, however, gives us a pretty solid timeline as to where their relevance is to being after the War with the Dragons, as that's when yellow lightning became a thing in the Erdtree capital, with stuff like the dragon cult. Now, part of my theory is that Mesmer wanted the snakes of his body to become true dragons. And this actually fits in another topic of like inspiration to Godwyn the Grafted. Or not Godwyn the Grafted, Godric the Grafted. Where he thought to himself, well, if it's that difficult to have true dragons merged with your flesh, why not just graft them there? Might be a little impure, but it might still be of good, relevant dues of his might. And otherwise, the iconography of this guy's presentation is much to do with the overall Draconians, the Drake Knights, like Eleonora, but also is very reminiscent of the duelists. Like, their attire is a pretty close match to this topically. Which could suggest that he's using arcane dragon magic here. In which case, his weapon itself might be an arcane dragon weapon. So, probably consider upping your arcane for the DLC if you want to use that weapon. Or whatever magic arts he has. We see the candle tree. Now this pertains strongly to another sort of topic I kind of put together in a video prior. The topic of who actually tied up Dung Eater. The fact that he was tied up in a sewer jail underneath the capital, and on the way there, there's like some of the blood-soaked attire of the officials that run the capital and the rest of Altus Plateau, apparently. It's more than likely the officials of the Erdtree who were nobles in birth by blood, by a white-haired descendant of House Marias, or House Marai, I don't know how it's pronounced. But it's likely they're a descendant of that, of them, and of a data car also, as they were definitely in charge of the Volcano Manor. If you pay careful attention, you'll see all kinds of things that belong to them, like Inquisitor Giza and his Giza wheel apparently got adopted in use as a weapon option for the abductor virgins, which could suggest some seniority to the list of things. But you see paintings of an official we're unfamiliar with in terms of the headpiece of, inside the Volcano Manor. We see a painting of what could be the Erdtree on fire. At the foot of Mount Gelmir, there is like a cave full of contraband. Like we see the candle tree. Kind of like this candle these enemies here are using. Which was considered heretical to the Golden Order. So badly that they had to kind of shut down every single ideal spread of it as a concept. And they also had to ban fire overall in the Landel capital. But someone suggested that these are omen horns here, and I think that could actually be. Otherwise, what kind of garbs are these? I'm not entirely sure, but the coloration of it half reminds me of the Mount Gelmir forces, which I believe is supposed to be like really close to the Erdtrees, but more depicts like symbols of blasphemy. Now this is just a magic type we've never seen before. Elden Ring cares deeply about its magic theory, and this is no exception of unusual because we never seen anything this color before. We've seen close with gravity sorcery, but nothing this like violety pink. This is an absolute first. Otherwise, if it was more scarlet reddy color, it could be related to Millennia in her like spreading of like the scarlet rot.
I presume you too are keen to know just what kind.
Now there was a theory that bears are becoming more dragon-like. That could very well be true, although I am half concerned of the fact that it could be just closer to the Crucible, as that was a big no-no to the Golden Order, where it was considered more primitive, in which case a lot of things having to do with the Crucible were quite frowned upon, hidden away, done away with, etc. This looks really neat. Not much to say about that. However, it was probably relevant to the blue dancer that stops the Rot Goddess prior and showed Millennia how to use a sword his way. Now, I'm pretty sure this guy is just the ribcage of this horse coming out, as well as some of its bones. In which case, I am very excited to see how this gets presented any further.
Those stripped of the grace of gold shadow death, the embrace of restless flame.
Come now, touch the withered arm, and travel to the realm of shadow. I will not be far behind.
The Crucible skill,
We meet together.
specifically the one the Axe Crucible Knights use with like their swords. And here's an interesting little detail. We have like these weird little neat gaps here, almost like there's like roots or something going across, or maybe it's like splitting apart like glass. I kind of doubt it, But it's very interesting to think about what that could actually mean. But before I get too far out, let me actually continue onward about my theory about the my speculation of House Marias and the officials. Now, until recently, someone pointed out that Messmer's name is possibly Old German for knife maker, and thinking about it, there is a surprising amount of details of people of the Erdtree and having really fancy designated knives, like the Erd Steel Dagger Kenneth Haight gives you as a reward. There's the Blade of Calling given to finger readers or finger maidens to go burn themselves in the volcano, or not volcano, the Forge of the Giants. There's the Misericord used for delivering lethal blows to two sickly patients as a means of mercy. And overall, Vaati was quite informed, surprisingly, which could suggest that he had ties to a little of more places than we could have imagined. In fact, his stuff is actually, his talisman is actually found in the Volcano Manor, mind you. Before you go dismissing this, like, his talisman, the dagger talisman, is physically found in the Volcano Manor. And it even depicts his Misericord as well as the mask that he wears, not wields. But more fun details. The Inquisitor's Girandol from the Volcano Manor, found in that path with like the abductor versions leading to the outside, from like that hidden path which the abductor version in Rayo Lucaria takes you to. Mohg's staff, or Mohg's three-pronged spear, works much in the same, only it's basically for strength build that Mohg has. And they're both visually similar in terms of spear tip lengths, from the middle to the two side ones. They both do burn damage and bleed. So there's definitely some reason to kind of like speculate on this one, actually. But realizing that, and realizing where some of these seedbed curses are, gave me another kind of theory. Now, this theory, which I actually talked about in a different video, was about the topic of why was there seedbed curses in the Halig tree, which was completely unusual, because you would think Dung Eater is seeking revenge. He's lashing out at all these Erdtree people. Miquella's not of the Erdtree. In fact, he's trying to treat the accursed. He's trying to bring them to his order. He's trying to usher them into his age to make things better for them and for him. Miquella's doing all this very selfless stuff. It is absolutely astonishing. So it's like, why would anyone, even especially the Dung Eater, go out of his way on such a rampage for any reason? And then I thought to myself, well, the practice that seems to be of seedbed curses sounds like a very surgical one. And it does seem like an obscure concept in general as it starts, unless you know about it in the first place, of like the organs and their effects if moved, transplanted, or whatever. In which case, a possible war surgeon, especially one under the guidance of those who will commit all of the darkest deeds of humanity as part of human nature for the Golden Order. In which case, Vaati just fits so many shoes that it's ridiculous. Like, what sizes are those things on his feet, man? So, more than likely, the process of seedbed curse spread wasn't solely the Dung Eater. In fact, it very well could have been originated by Vaati and Mohg, and then passed on as a knowledge to said Dung Eater to increase the count of omens. However, we know Mohg was going out of his way and to the disregard of Miquella's people to go kidnap Miquella. He had every reason to resort to whatever he needed to find out whatever he needed to. And we know that Miquella's people would even prejudice Mohg for being an omen, kidnapping their lord. As there was that one spirit talking in the consecrated snowfield toward the direction of Mohg's sending gate to his Mohgwyn dynasty. And he was basically shouting and cursing at a filthy omen kidnapping Miquella. And if you pay careful attention to where the seedbed curses are, they are half relevantly placed towards ways, like a specific way to Miquella, which would be the area where we have an elevator that goes down to him. They're in that general vicinity. They're not on the other side of the Erdtree, they're on that side. One up higher, one discreetly placed lower and in the shadows of some hidden area. That was so hidden I had no idea it was there until looking it up. In which case, yeah, he has every reason to use that as a means to get information. He can curse an individual as a way to get them to talk, or even distract the other people around him with the torture, his howls and screams, enough to keep their fixation of attention in that general vicinity, while he goes and does what he must to go get to Miquella and go kidnap him. So, what we can gather is what I'm telling you, that we have no credible proof that Dung Eater had any reason to do any of this. But we have lots of proof that Mohg would. And not only that seedbed curse spread was half related to him. So that's basically what that theory is about. But I go more into some of the processes in these videos I am showing on my screen, as well as other details that would take too long to really go over. But this one also comments on the fact that the Dung Eater himself had some kind of order that he valued, and it was relative to a medallion he keeps on his chest piece of the sun. And the fact that we don't see any relevance as to where this could have possibly have been, what was the logical conclusion for me was that it was pertaining to Godwyn because of a certain set of details. There's a reference of the sun being pretty relevant to a sun illuminated city on the Sun Realm shield, which was found on only skeletons wearing red capes and having a sun emblem on like the back of their capes. So it's like, okay, you're of some kind of like people, but of whom? But a careful attention would tell you that this was important to a certain age of time, a time where it was relative to the dragons. As to when of that kind of case scenario, it's hard to say, but it very well could have been of Godwyn and his attempt to befriend the dragons or something. Or it could be of after he did. As you see beastmen with the shield also in Farum Azula and as like skeletons. The fact that they're all skeletons suggests they're already past. And the fact that there's no relevant mention of this in like the Shattering, especially with any of these main forces being of the demigods, suggests that it was a time before the Shattering, but it was after the relevance of access to Farum Azula. So it was very natural that it would be relevant to Godwyn, but the biggest shock about this topic is the fact that Mesmer exists. It's like, where did this guy come from? And then apparently, this is very intentional. He was just name strucken from history of the Erdtree because he was deemed as a traitor. So you can see where I draw all these conclusions from. It makes a lot of sense. It makes practically perfect sense. It might not be fully fleshed out, but it is still very credible. And the fact that it ties in pretty half decently with my inverse lore theory still, I think this is quite a an accomplishment, I will say. But before I start crashing from being so tired, I want to thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all join me on the journey for when I dive into the DLC also. I hope to watch a lot of other people's journeys at it. I like to see how that all goes. Although I usually like to watch their perspectives after mine because I don't want to be spoiled. But yeah, this has been a lot of fun, and it's also been quite a bit of work trying to formulate how I want to best convey the overall topics of this without discussing too much of things you've probably heard already, whether it was another content creator or if it was myself. I try not to spit out the same things like too much. I recognize things could get like stale if it's like too much the same. So I gave it a good bit of time, like looking over other people's videos about their expectations and understandings of what's coming with the DLC, to make sure I wasn't feeding you the same thing. But yes, I do agree with the idea that he was the impaler of like the fire giants. I do think that is entirely relevant, and I'm very excited to see what becomes of that. I feel like we're going to get one heck of a good explanation. In fact, it's probably actually going to be Pretty wild. But yes, until next time, you have yourselves a great one. And don't you go hollow or whatever they say to the Tarnished. I guess don't die. Don't become grafted. I have no idea. Don't become a bell bearing. Anyway, see yous.